Our next speaker is Chris, so Chris Sherwin. When we started talking, really wanted him to speak tonight because he told me that he's a product person. He makes real things. He's had over 20 years experience and now has his own sustainable design studio and consultancy. And I think that's important to think about the product side and the real things to kind of move the conversation on from digital and websites as well. So Chris is the founder and director of Reboot Innovation, which is a specialist sustainable innovation and design consultancy. He's been in the field for over 20 years and has helped to develop several world-first sustainable products, including the multi-award winning Fairphone 2, which some of you may remember was the world's most ethical smartphone. And that's a whole, when we were talking, we almost could have done a whole talk around all of the products and things that go into our mobile phones. And when we're thinking about sustainability, we kind of forget about all the things we're carrying around in our pockets and using every day, and all the parts that go into those. But in his talk, so Chris, he's going to be questioning whether today's dominant design methods, which is human-centered design and design thinking, if they can really help us through the climate emergency, or whether it's time for a drastic rethink in the ways that we design. So I'll hand over to Chris.
Thank you very much. Am I okay with the mic? Can you hear me? Okay, good. You know when you write those bits of text and send them in the beginning, and then actually hear somebody saying them, and think, oh, that's a little bit too long. It goes a little bit too grand. Oh well. Cool. So delighted to be here. I'm also half tempted to start by answering the entropy question, but actually I think I'm going to come back to that one at the end if it's okay. I thought it was a brilliant question. So I'd like to take 15 or 20 minutes of your time to talk about design, and I think how I believe design has to change to make it fit for a sustainable future. In truth, there's probably quite a lot of overlap with your presentation. And I think I'll be making several of the same points. It's one of the downsides of being third rather than first. I think, I guess what I can also do is start to illustrate some of the points I'm making with some of the things that I've worked on over the last few years. So, first of all, a little bit about me and my business. So I run Reboot Innovation, and we specialize in sustainable innovation and design. And I've been doing that work for actually 25 years this year. And I got into sustainable design. I trained as a product designer. And I got into this before we called it sustainable design. So we used to call it green design back in the mid-90s. And then we changed the term to eco-design. And since then, we're struggling to work out what to call it, whether it's sustainable design or circular design or sustainable innovation. But it's nice to see that it's sort of grown and become a more kind of mainstream concept now. And essentially, that's what we do. We help businesses, innovators, and to some extent also even designers with ideas and innovations for a better world. The ideas and the innovations bit's quite important because I do quite a lot of sort of front-end innovation projects that are about almost pre-brief, helping organizations work out what they should be designing. And then the innovation stuff is usually working on real things, you know, that look often better in the images and the presentations you show. Here's just a few things that I will have worked on over the last few years. I'm going to talk about the one on the left anyway. Fairphone you mentioned already. Fairphone 2 was a fantastic project to work on, which was, I think Greenpeace voted it the world's kind of most ethical smartphone, being ethically sourced and repairable and modular, upgradable, lasting 5 years instead of 2 years. One that it might be worth you checking out is one of the last things I worked on last year was Winnow Vision. So Winnow's an amazing business, absolutely in your world. So Winnow offer a kind of software as a service solution for commercial kitchens to essentially cut their food waste in half. And the product that you see there is the world's first AI-enabled smart bin. So it uses AI, machine learning and image recognition to sort of monitor and track the stuff that a kitchen will throw away into the smart bin, feeds that back to a kitchen and shows them that it's roughly equivalent to the entire profit margin. About 2 to 12% of everything they use in a kitchen gets thrown away at the end. So there's some projects. I do work with clients, but I also occasionally team up with design agencies. So if any of you guys are looking for it's not unfamiliar for me to, kind of be the sustainability brains on a design project where design agencies need support as well. And I just thought I'd mention that while I was here. But I want to essentially focus on this is I guess the big point of my presentation. It's this, need to move beyond our current principles, the current sort of, I guess, if you like, the pillars on which we've built design, the design process today. And the way I'm thinking about it and talk about it is shifting from human-centered to humanity-centered design. And I wanted to start with this. Anybody know this? I know you're going to back away from me because I'm showing stuff now. Kind of in a digital event, I'm showing a thing. Anybody know what this is? It's a chair, clearly. It is a chair. Well done, you lot. You're close. Le Corbusier's, that's a very good guess. So it's actually by Marcel Breuer. It's called the Vasily chair, designed in 1925 at the height of modernism. Right, so Breuer, the story, and in fact, if any of you have gone through art school training, the Bauhaus, where this was first designed, it will have shaped absolutely your entire design training. Kind of being trained as a designer, essentially, our sort of the discipline and the principles of design were created during the Bauhaus. And actually, this is a physical manifestation of that, right? So Breuer was cycling along on his bicycle, noticed the fabulously twisted and bent, tubes, saw that all chairs at the time were created just using, timber. I thought, brilliant, I'm going to make a chair out of tubular steel, the cutting edge of technology. Kind of encapsulates all of the best thinking of the time. Modernism, it's egalitarian, it's cheap, it's accessible. So you can capture sort of socialism in this design. It's not bling or expensive. It's not for the elite. And in a sense, kind of this is what we know about design. It sort of responds to and shapes the sort of ideology and the philosophies of the time. In this case, it was modernism. We've seen that happen throughout the 20th century through things like the space race, even looking back to the Industrial Revolution. Design is, in a sense, a sort of, a product or a physical manifestation of the time. If I track forward to today, what are the dominant, kind of, I guess, the design philosophies that we use? Well, it's probably human-centered design and its kissing cousin, design thinking, right? So, design thinking is even in the Harvard Business Review now. CEOs of leading organizations are talking about design thinking. Wasn't it IBM's just hired 1,000, a couple of years ago, hired 1,000 design thinkers. In a sense, as all of us guys trained as designers, this is going to make our hearts sing. This is exactly where we really always wanted to be. That sort of human-centeredness is, almost, it's gone mainstream now. But of course, I guess it's, as that's happened, and it's brilliant that that's happened, I think it is only right to ask, kind of, well, as we move from a world, 20th century world that was about, kind of growth and about industrial processes and about, I guess, modernism, into the 21st century, where one of the dominant paradigms is going to be ecology and sustainability. Are our, kind of dominant approaches, principles, you called them, Anna, are they still fit for a sustainable future? And I guess I'm going to answer it myself. I'm not quite sure they are. And I think that we actually need to, we need to build from what we've got. We need to move on, and we actually need a different toolkit that will make design fit for a sustainable future. Now, I'd like to talk about, I think there's a few, actually. I think there's a few things we need to change. I'm just going to highlight 3 and then talk in a bit more detail about 2 of them. Now, I had put enough slides in here for 3, but I realized I'd gone for about 30 minutes, and Brett would not be happy if I did that. So just going to talk about the first 2, but I'll just summarize them now. And again, Annie, you talked about this already, I think. So this is not an unfamiliar one. I think the first one is, what we tend to do in design is we design for people, we design for humans, but in a sense that's been sort of misappropriated as designing for consumers, often using consumer insight-driven processes, very similar to consumer marketing. And actually what we need to do is move, is almost capture and start to add value to a wider bunch of stakeholders, not just users, not just consumers, actually all people that are impacted. That's point 1. Point two is, one of the core tools we use, and again, you could probably go into all of the agencies that you represent, you've got some sort of customer mapping tool. So let's map the journey across sort of experience, being aware and using it and making it fabulous to use, and then, loyalty. Everybody's got those. But of course, what that tends to focus on is it's only the customer journey, right? And there's a bit that happens before and after, which we just entirely forget about in the design process. And then the third one is actually just about where we create value. So in a sense, what human-centered design and the desirability, viability, and feasibility model's done is that we create almost flipped the logic of business, just kind of change business problems into user opportunities. So we actually create profitability and business value through making things desirable for users. And that's great. It's great for business. It's great for users. What about creating value for everybody else? So actually, we need actually in our design process to start thinking about, let's create value for all. Let's create shared value. I'm going to go a little bit into detail, showing you, I guess, some tools from the first two. I think there's a number of things we need to do. I'll just talk in detail about two. First one, designing for the users. We put users right in the center of the design process, and we often use, as I say, consumer marketing insight type processes, like ethnography and focus groups and interviews. They're core design, design research processes that we use right at the start of the process. All of our insights come from, kind of users and behavior and their needs. And one of the problems with that, in fact, there's two problems with that, but the first one is consumers actually sometimes get it wrong. and they certainly get it wrong on sustainability. And actually, my field is littered with, sort of stories of where kind of you slightly put your head in your hands because the consumer research is actually miles off the science. There's often a disconnect between what consumers think and what the science says. A brilliant example of that at the moment is the debate about sustainable packaging. And I'm so thrilled that we are talking about sustainable packaging in society more widely and zero waste. But actually, quite a lot of that debate's quite naive, encapsulated by the whole sort of, should we wrap a cucumber? So if everybody unwrap a cucumber, it's plastic free. You don't get any plastic in the oceans. Of course, I've never heard of a plastic wrapper on the beaches in the UK, to be honest. So whether or not that's really one of the material impacts, I'm not entirely sure. But an unwrapped cucumber, 2 to 3 days. A wrapped cucumber, 5 to 7 days. The big impacts of cucumbers and their packaging, by about 95% to 5%, is in the production of the cucumber, not in the production of the packaging. So asking consumers sometimes get it wrong. The second one is that using those traditional kind of design research techniques, like interviews and ethnography and things like that, sustainability needs, they're a bit abstract, right? They're a bit intangible, they're a bit long-term. And certainly, many of the projects that I've worked in over the years, the marketing, CMI, Consumer Marketing Insights, or the marketing people have come back and, at the end of it and said, well, we've done our survey, right, and cost, quality, convenience, et cetera, always comes out above sustainability. It's like 4th or 5th. And probably over the last few years, it might have moved up to 2nd, 3rd, or sort of 4th. But actually, when we're trading sustainability, which is a secondary benefit, against a primary benefit of something like cost and convenience, it usually fails. It's almost using those techniques gives your clients and marketers a reason to drop all of this stuff, because it's not the most important thing. Now, almost nobody will use any of your products because they are sustainable. They'll use them because they're better and because they fulfill a need. That's a job to be done, and they'll buy it as a secondary support benefit because it's sustainable. Right, so we need to sort of, I don't know whether our research techniques are quite right for the sorts of questions we're asking here. And the way I paraphrase that is with this brilliant quote from my sustainability comms mates at Futerra. And they say that selling sustainability is not like selling soap, it's more like getting people to use soap in the first place. Right, and again, consumer marketing insight research techniques, design research techniques are not particularly good at this. The way I liken it is it's a bit like telling somebody they've got cancer with a text. Right, that's not something you do, kind of with a short-term interaction with them. You've got to sit them down and have a proper conversation with them about it. And I think, again, that's where we need to be moving, I think, design, certainly design research onto. What does that look like in practice? I think we need to start looking for insights from wider places than just consumers and users. I'll show you a tool that I use. This is traffic lighting, red and amber and green hotspots. And what you will see here is a hotspots matrix for the impacts of dairy, so yogurt and milk. This is, we're in the land of products now, so stick with me. But what you'll see there is, across the top are key sustainability indicators. Down the side is the sort of stages of that product's life. What we traditionally would do in consumer insights is look down that column. It's only the product when it's in the hands of consumers. Right, and you'll see a couple of hotspots there. Right, but of course what we need to do with a wider setup, with a wider toolkit, is start to look at other impact areas, not just when in the hands of consumers, when we're shipping things around, when they're in production, when they're produced and processed, and actually when they're sourced. And this is, I think, one of the sort of, I guess, the key tools that certainly I would use. Because I'll quickly walk you through what that tells you. So of course it tells you some brilliant consumer insight stuff, like the fact that with a with a yogurt, it's happened to be about the yogurt category. Very unglamorous. Sorry about that. But at least every day, there's a lot of waste from buy one get one free, sort of incorrect storage in the fridge, letting it go mouldy, throwing it away, etc., etc. That's classic consumer insight work. But there's also some stuff you can find that's in different bits of the supply chain. So, we know that dairy products in sourcing, have massive greenhouse gas emissions. And again, I'm sure you probably know this from agricultural practices and slurry runoff and rumination, the farting and burping of the animals. But also crucially, in this case, we found that with this manufacturer, they were wasting between 6 and 30% of products because supermarkets were over forecasting and over ordering them. That's pretty interesting to find out, right? So that's both a cost to the supplier and then a cost to pay for the waste as well. And what these guys did, and this is a Yo Valley, was they did this, and you probably tell what it is from the name. It's called Yo Valley Leftovers. So it's a limited edition product that they actually only produce it twice a year. And when they get to a certain point of that manufacturing waste in the supply chain, it triggers a new and unique flavor. In this case, it was strawberry and fig. That's why it's a limited edition, because they can only use what the supermarkets have wasted for them. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once you've used up all of your ingredients for this, they make maybe 200,000 units of this, but they don't have to pay for the materials to be. It's not a loss of ingredients, and it's not a loss to have them dealt with as well. That is a little social product because it triggers a donation for a food waste charity as well called Fair Share in the UK. So that shows you a little bit of what you can do by looking more widely than just consumer insights. In this case, that's looking into getting insights from manufacturing, right, or from other areas of the supply chain. Cool. Going to move on to the second one, if that's okay. So this one is about, in a sense, you already sort of designed for a system, right? So you'll already look at a system. But I guess the dominant paradigm for design at the moment, the system, is the customer journey. Again, been in a number of design agencies, seen their user experience map or their customer journey diagram, sort of stages of when the product or service is in their hands, and that's just an illustration of them. And it focuses chiefly on the consumption and use, bits of the experience, bits of the life, I guess, of a product. Now, one of the problems with that is that, products and services have a life before they got into the hands of people and after they got into the hands of people. And this little bottle here is a great example of that there could be problems there, right, in where it comes from and where it goes. And I went to a recycler a few years ago on a packaging project. We were getting him to review some work that we were doing. And it's over in Dagenham, actually, just a couple of miles down the road. And we asked him, well, what's the most difficult thing you have to deal with? Almost, what's your nemesis? What's the worst thing that comes through the factory? And it was fruit shoots, right? And fruit shoots So when fruit shoots were created, a massive commercial success, right? So, there's nothing like this in the category. So, it was a bit more fruity, but had incredible on-shelf standout appeal, just through the purple and the orange, right? So I think within 8 years, this was a £100 million category for Britvic. Almost won every design awards, and is a massive case study of success. But for a recycler, right, it doesn't get picked up by he's got an infrared scanner, right, for plastics. And the new materials, the new purple and orange, doesn't get picked up. So it goes through, he wants pure white and clear, and he gets all these purple flakes and orange flakes, and then he has to throw the entire ton of recyclate away. And of course, that would have been quite useful for the designers to know in the beginning of the process, right? The fact that what they were doing, although it's a massive commercial success, incredible appeal to consumers, stuffs up the recycling process at the end. That would have been very useful to know at the start of the process. And that's what happens at the end. You also need to have a think about what happens at the start of your process. This is a case study that I heard somebody talking about actually only 2 weeks ago. So anybody know the Uniqlo? This is sort of $50 cashmere sweaters. Right, so again, enormous commercial success. They've sold, probably somebody's wearing one in here, so I'm not trying to catch you out. So this is, to shortcut this, the story of this is that the demand for this has created almost an artificial goat herding economy in Afghanistan. Right, and the carrying capacity for goats in that area is about 25 million goats, and it's now up to 60 million. And it's essentially led to a massive desertification in the area because of goat farming and an artificial economy being created, just as a direct result of the success of this piece of design. Now again, that's about where it comes from, not where it goes. If you're the designer of that, it'd be quite useful to know that, right? That that sort of, there might be some implications to your choices of material, the things that you're designing, the things that you're specifying. So. And I guess where I'm going with this is, you will be, I'm sure, familiar with customer, kind of customer journeys and user experience. And actually, what we need to start thinking about is, the sort of life cycles, that things had a life before and after we produce them. And in a sense, even my world of environmentalists gets this a little bit wrong, right? Because actually, they see the use phase as actually a quite instrumental phase. So they never dig around about making that at all desirable for people. So actually, I think our real challenge is actually to merge those worlds. We sort of need to start putting together the consumer experience map, customer journey map, and the life cycle map into this sort of, I guess, the full product journey. What happens after, what happens before, and how we can join up these two circles. So that's just 2 ways, right? I think there are others. Just going to leave you with one final thought. So it's really interesting, just again to go from low level, sort of what you do in design, back up to high levels. And I think, interestingly, I hear descriptions of the sustainability revolution being, almost as the same scale as the industrial and agricultural revolutions, but at the speed of the digital revolution. Something really, sort of exciting happening here, like really, really big changes. And of course, I guess my question is, you wouldn't use the same types of design for whatever the agricultural revolution, for the digital revolution. You guys wouldn't give a digital design brief to a product guy like me, because I wouldn't make a very good job of it. So I guess as we move forward, sort of through a climate and ecological emergency into the sustainability age, I think it's time for humanity-centered design. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. Really, really good. Learned a lot. Do we have any questions for Chris? I've got the gentleman in the white sweater, just here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you talked a lot about sort of focusing on the system, and I just sort of wondered how you justify working for a dairy company when sort of a lot of people would argue that the very existence of the dairy industry is sort of a threat to sustainability.
Ooh. Good one. Ooh. Wow. In a sense, we have to start with from where we are. I think, I mean, I don't, I mean, you're right to say that in a, you know, in a sustainable world, dairy would have a much, you know, much more diminished role. No question about that. It's like it'll be one of the big sectors where we need to sort of certainly reduce our consumption of dairy. I mean, I guess, I would put Yo Valley's practice, so they're fully organic dairy, right? And I think I would certainly put their practice up against pretty much any other dairy company that you could find as one of the leaders and as one of the best practice examples. And I think my other answer would be, I mean, in a sense, you know, sort of whether you're up for active engagement or whether you just want to disconnect, right? So I signed up to, just before Christmas, not to work with oil and gas. Right, so I won't do any work with oil and gas now. And I think that's the line I've drawn personally in the sand. You know, I think I wouldn't work with gambling or defence, but I think I still see some benefit in active engagement with some of these other industries. And I think, you know, as a sort of exemplar of sustainability leadership, you know, proper innovation in this field, I think that stuff's important. You know, I think it's really important to do. I think it's really important to show, even if it's catalytic, even if so that probably saves a couple of 100 tons a year of waste. But actually, you know, kind of, I'm going to show it to you. You know, it might create waves in the rest of the dairy industry, or actually in the rest of the food industry. And I think all that stuff's important. I think it's important work.
Well, Tom's caught my eye. I'm going to go to Tom if we'll get a microphone over to the front. And I'll come back to you after.
So, this is the difficult question. The reply. Oh dear. This is going to be data, I know, isn't it?
No.
Oh, okay, good. It's a relief.
You talked about the whole sort of cycle and how designers tend to focus on just really the sort of the consumer use part of the cycle. But I guess that's sort of what they're employed to do in most cases. So what do you think designers can do to get their employers to let them sort of explore and actually give value to the other parts of the cycle?
Good point. I mean, I think so. I think design consulting is very much like that. You know, you get given a brief, and it's quite hard to stretch outside it. Most of my work's design consulting, so I absolutely know that. I think we've got, you know, kind of, it's a classic sort of challenge the brief. And if you're going to challenge the brief, show the benefits of all of this stuff. You know, you've got to almost make the business case for stretching beyond that, and that there will be potentially opportunities for your clients, would be point one. I think not all design is done in the consultancy model. So, you know, the sort of designer entrepreneurial model is an interesting one to explore, right, where you've got much higher degrees of freedom. And in a funny way, quite a lot of the design leadership on sustainability tends to come from entrepreneurial designers, designer makers who are not working for clients, who are actually doing it themselves. So I hold a little bit more, maybe a little bit more hope. And then I think the third point would be, there's this fabulous diagram that I saw probably 10 years ago when I was sort of scratching my head about, you know, well, what are we going to do as designers? You know, sort of can't influence the entire system. It was in an IDEO document. It's got lost somewhere, I don't know, on the internet. And what it talked about was sort of design at the center of the. We all want to place ourselves at the center, right? We're at the center of the process, makes us important. But actually, it was almost kind of design facilitating the process for others. And actually, with complex systems like almost any system, but particularly sustainability systems, you need to get, you know, kind of all of it. You need to get. I mean, in a company, it would be production and supply chain and, you know, marketing and all those guys together, because you probably when you start, you don't know where the answer is. And I guess the role of the designer is not to do it themselves. It's probably the facilitator's role, you know, the sort of the strong generalist. I guess that's some of the stuff that we do well, you know, sort of understanding the needs of different stakeholders and facilitating the process and drawing it all together. Sounds a bit woolly, you know, and in a sense you probably wouldn't necessarily be the superhero designer, but that's probably a more important role.
Cool. Okay, and we'll just take one final question.
Can I answer the entropy question at the end then?
Yeah, we'll go for one more and then we'll go on to
I'm
that,
not sure I
and then-
can. I'm really setting myself up for a fall here, because it's such a difficult question.
Cool, go for it.
So picking up on your the quote about selling soap and versus selling into people washing their hands. So what would you think about doing to sell in sustainability on the internet to consumers, designers, developers? I suppose, but probably more interestingly for me would be the end users, the consumers. But any other thoughts you've got would be great.
God, how would I sell sustainability
into consumers of the internet?
I mean, I think,
but when the concept.
I think so. Usually, mainstream consumers don't understand sustainability as sustainability. They're interested in single issues, right? So they get it. At the moment, they get it through waste. Right? So sort of because waste is stuff that you often see on the table or goes into your bin. Right? That's much more recognisable to people at the moment than carbon and climate change. That's the invisible bit. Parts per million of carbon. I don't understand that. What does that mean? So I guess I pick topics that are relevant and usually pick single topics that sort of resonate with people's lives. It doesn't have to be waste, and it'll be different per target audience. But you need, I would say, I mean, we've gone through the phase of trying to sell the concept of sustainability, and everybody thinks it's a crap term, and they're probably right. So I think consumers want to understand this through simple single issues like waste, and they probably do understand carbon footprints now. Yeah, so break it up into manageable pieces. And I think the second thing you should do is think about, it's the benefits-led approach. This is properly classic marketing, right? That, actually Tom's was a great example of this. What sort of more efficient websites do is they make it faster. They make it less clutter. They're probably easier to read. They're probably easier to navigate. What's the benefits of doing all of that efficient and green stuff for people, and actually highlight almost the personal individual benefits of it, rather than certainly don't lead on the green stuff in general. Lead on the benefits and support it with the green stuff would be my recommendation.
Cool. And if you touch on entropy, and then we'll.
Now we're coming back. I cannot do that quick.
Okay, we'll touch on. Let's see how we go at the end.
Let's see whether that was really not
awesome.
a quick answer.
Right, thanks so much, Chris. Thank you.